or something.
Put this there.
I don't know, it was under the door on Marlboro Street.
Welcome to the July 26th, 2021 meeting of the Sandusky City Commission. Prior to tonight's meeting, we'll have an invocation offered by Commissioner Twine, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Father God, we come humbly before your throne of grace, seeking and thank you for your grace and your mercy for this day. As we move forward with tonight's business, we ask for your wisdom and guidance as always. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Kresser, welcome back.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure for me to ask you to call the roll.
Mr. Poole?
Yep, I'm here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Murray's absent. Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Here.
Mr. Meinzer?
Here.
And Mr. Waddington?
Here.
May I have a motion to excuse Mr. Murray?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion? Without objection, that motion will be approved, and hearing no objection, that motion is approved. Commissioners, you have before you the minutes of our meeting of July the 12th, 2021. What's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner
I
Waddington.
move that we accept the minutes of the July 12th meeting and dispense with the formal reading.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion? Without objection, the motion will be approved. Hearing no objection, that motion is approved. Are there any residents of the audience that have questions pertaining to tonight's agenda? If there are, we'd ask you to step to the microphone, identify yourself, and give us your thoughts on agenda items only.
My name is Talib Garrett. My address is 512 Scott Street. And I have an issue with item 3, $300,000 give to the small city tap house. And my issue is, I know the city is trying to do something big for minorities and uplift their business, but it all started because of BML, because a black man died by the officer. And I feel like you guys gave some black, I looked through the meeting they have for like the passives, to bring it to the commission. And to me, I feel like you give the black owners crumbs while you gave another minority $300,000 for the next 3 years. And to me, I feel like that's very disrespectful. And I made a post on social media, and a lot of people was upset with it. Like, I had no problem helping other businesses out, but when people complain about Amvest Baseball Park, fields, dirt, and they need new dirt, the consensus stand is falling apart, then what people want a rec center, and y'all give businesses $300,000 that never did anything for the community. We got other businesses like Johnny Reed C&R that helps out the community, Manny Car Wash help out the community, Peace House East helps out the community, and all these other places that helps out communities. And then you're giving $300,000 to somebody that I don't know he ever did any charity. I haven't seen it. And I just feel like that's very, I don't know, just wasting money for other people that will help out the youth and help out and being part of the city. And other than that, I approve of all the rest of the items I looked over, but that's just my take.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. Any objections to that are duly noted. Any other comments from residents regarding agenda items? Just the agenda items. We have a section almost at the end of our meeting that allows residents to comment on any
the
item.
whole thing.
Ms. Kresser, do you have anything email or written from residents?
Yes, Commission President Brady, I have 2 emails from residents. The first one from Sharon Johnson, 1139 5th Street, regarding item number 3 on the regular agenda. The tap house is up for a $300,000 increment grant over 3 years. First year, $20,000, second year, $140,000, and the third year, $140,000. The commissioners should not be voting on the grant as written for the following reasons. The balance in the Economic Development Fund is $75,000, which does not have sufficient funds for the entire $300,000 expenditure. The $20,000 for the first year is in the account, but the balance of $280,000 has not yet been budgeted. The city can only certify money that is in the fund at the time of the grant approval expenditure and not 2 years out pursuant to Section 22 of the city charter and the Ohio Revised Code. The reason for certification is to make sure the city can meet the obligation at the time of passage. Promising money 2 years out places the city at risk, coming up short funding due to unforeseen events. I would like to know how the city could certify money that has not been budgeted or presently in the account. The second comment is from Tim Schwanger, 362 Sheffield Way, regarding item B on consent, the Huntley Building easement, asking how many parking spaces in the subject parking lot will be eliminated. And then regarding item number 3 on the regular agenda, this grant will be paid out over a 3-year period rather than lump sum at the project completion. I question the wisdom of spending the grant over 3 years with no guarantee of funds in the Economic Development EDIC account, incentive committee, I believe that stands for. The supporting documents indicate increased income tax and property taxes tied to the project. Please provide dollar estimates for income tax and property tax increases.
Thank you,
That is
Ms.
all.
Presser. Those questions will be addressed as the legislation comes before this commission. Commissioners, you have before you several communications from staff recommending various legislation. Can I have a motion to accept these communications?
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, that motion will be approved. And hearing no objection, that motion is approved. Commissioners, we have 3 consent items to consider this evening. Do any of you wish to move any of these items to the regular agenda? Ms. Crest, will you present the consent agenda, please?
Yes, Mr. Brady. Item A is an ordinance authorizing and directing payment to Software Solutions Incorporated of Dayton, Ohio, for the annual software support fee for the period April 1, 2021 through March 31, 2022, declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the City Charter. Item B is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into an agreement to terminate, I'm reading the whole thing, aren't I?
You don't have to do that. But we like to hear from you. You don't have to do that.
And we've been here for a while. Amendment to easements granted to the Huntley and Cook buildings. And item C, change order number 1 and final for the J.C. Park Connector Trail, and is a deduction.
Commissioners, having heard these ordinances, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Twine.
I move to accept the consent agenda items A, B, and C, and declaring that all ordinances and/or resolutions as drafted and presented to the City Commission under the consent agenda shall take effect in accordance with the section reflected in the ordinances and/or resolutions, whether it be in accordance with Section 13 or Section 14 of the City Charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. There was a question on item B regarding parking spaces, a loss of parking spaces in that area. Mr. Klein, I wonder if you can fill in the blanks for the answer to that question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Through you, Mr. President, there will be no parking spaces lost in that parking lot with these easements.
That's a good answer. Thank you. Mr. Cresser, you call a roll on the motion, please.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
And now on the ordinances.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Those ordinances are passed. Ms. Cresser, will you present item number 1 on our regular agenda?
Yes, in its entirety.
And you don't have to read the
Number-
entire.
Number 1 is an ordinance amending Ordinance 21-066, passed on May 10, 2021, authorizing and directing the city manager to accept an entitlement grant in the revised amount of $761,267 total community development block grant funds for the program year of July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2022, and to submit to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development a revised fiscal year 2020 one-year action plan, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Meiser.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 City Charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Mr. Holliday, are you in a position to tell us what we're doing with that piece of legislation?
Yes, Commissioner Brady, members of the commission, you may recall in May of this year, you authorized us to submit the annual action plan to HUD for our community development block grant program for the year 2021. After that was done, we were fortunately notified by HUD that the allocation was actually had been increased by a little over $11,000 additional dollars. So we need your authorization today to submit a new action plan. We are proposing that additional $11,000 be allocated to the public facilities program within the block grant. And we'll be working with Director Klein and his staff to identify eligible projects to add to the list of programs and projects to utilize that $11,000. But we are asking for your support today to go ahead and submit that revised action plan to HUD.
Additional comments or questions, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Poole.
just that this is timely, since we've been getting concerns from residents that we seldom or never had before about flooding in their basements over the last week or so. So glad to see this money coming in.
Additional comments, Commissioners? Ms. Presser, you call the roll on the motion, please.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes,
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
that ordinance is passed. Ms. Presser, present item number 2, please.
Yes, item number 2 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a sub-recipient agreement with Second Harvest Food Bank to assist with a downtown mobile pantry and HUB hub program, and to expend an amount not to exceed $45,000 from Community Development Block Grant COVID funds, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Poole.
just for somebody to talk about what this is going to be and where and how it's going to work,
Mr. Holliday, I think you might have those answers.
so the public knows.
Yes, well, there will be more details coming out, but we're excited to partner with Second Harvest Food Bank for them to have a greater presence here in the city of Sandusky through their mobile pantry and hub. They're going to be providing a variety of social, health, and public services through this. Certainly, food assistance will be a main priority. Commission may recall that the city received additional block grant dollars to combat the negative impacts of the COVID pandemic last year, and Second Harvest is an ideal partner for us to do that. So we will be disseminating more information once this is approved and Second Harvest finalizes their plans, and so the public can certainly look forward to hearing more about how they can take advantage of these services.
Thank you, Mr. Holliday. $45,000 is a significant amount of money, but it still is a drop in the bucket towards the need, I'm sure. Additional comments, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Poole.
just one on process, which matters to me. Because it's Second Harvest and we've dealt with them in the past, it's not a major issue, but in general, asking for approval to spend $45,000 with no clue what it's going to be, other than we, on faith that it's going to turn out to be something worth our time and effort, I just appreciate in the future that you not do that. It's tough to say no to something that we're pretty certain is going to work out well, but I don't think it's good business. If they don't know what they're going to do, just give us $45,000 and we'll figure it out. That's tough to ask us to do again, even though recognize him as a responsible party in the community, but just going forward on anything else you bring, I'd appreciate you not do that or have more information. Thank you.
Mr. Cresser, you call roll on the motion, please.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Cresser, you present item number 3, please.
Yes, item number 3 is an ordinance authorizing and approving a grant in the amount of $300,000 through the Economic Development Fund Program to Catene LLC, doing business as Small City Tap House and Clegg Brewery, in relation to the property located at 202 and 216 Columbus Avenue, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
On a motion and a second discussion.
Commissioner President, just the architect and the business owner.
We have in the audience,
In the audience.
Small City Taps House's architect. If you'd like to speak at this point, Mr. Decker, this would be a good time. You just state your name and address, we'll put that in the record.
Sure. Rob Decker, 1106 Taylor Road, Sandusky, Ohio. Mr. Chairman, thank you for hearing this proposal. We have submitted some materials, been through a couple of committees, and we're really excited to be here. And what we're really doing tonight is hopefully, thank you. Okay. Talk about the retention and celebration of a key historic structure at the core of downtown Sandusky. It's the Stones Block by name, originally built in 1870 by a prominent attorney, Walter Stone, who passed away, and then his wife picked up the project, 1883, completed the project. So the building's 138 years old. What we're really trying to do is restore the facade with the city's assistance and save the building. So what I'd like to do this evening is take you through a bit about the business and what they have done to reinvest in the business over these past years, 7 years, and then talk about the building and the project itself. First, I would just like to reflect on the way here. I was thinking about this room 10 years ago. Actually, it wouldn't be this room, but this body. And, reading the room, it was entirely optimistic at that time. And then you think about the body of work that's been put into the city with all the civic projects, the infrastructure that's been done, and all the residents and community that's pushing for that. And then the businesses coming together, private partnership, it's fantastic. It's just phenomenal. So we aren't first to the table, but we really want to join and sing in harmony with the city on this project. So I'm going to advance a slide and talk about this. 10 years ago also, I met Ka, who's in the audience. He'll answer questions if you want. And he said, Rob, I'm going to buy Cabana Jacks and put 60 beers on tap. And I said, you are crazy. That would never work. And every time I see him, I have to apologize. So, Ka, on public record, I was wrong. You were right. Now can we just move on? So, but it is Ka, but it's his family as well, and they worked very hard to put this together. The business was started in 2014. What I'd like to do is then go through just a sort of a timeline of what got them to where they are today. It's like any of these businesses, it's really the people and the product, and along with the product is the delivery of that product. And Ka, his family, and his people work very hard to work on quality and delivery 7 days a week. I've never been there where Ka has not been there himself to open the doors and close the doors at night. So they're very hardworking, very dedicated. The product's fantastic. It really is. And I'll have a few comments here later about what the reviews are and the ratings. But it is always a quality project. Here's a differentiator. The way they promote the product and the product that they're making is clearly different. This is going to be hard to read, but I'll just try to summarize it here briefly. The one difference about craft beer is it does have a following. And what is craft beer industry and et cetera? it really has such a strong following that in the state of Ohio alone, the revenues of craft beer were $3.86 billion, 8,300 jobs. And somehow the consumption doesn't quite match the output, so you know we're exporting the goods as well. But what's happened with Ka and the reputation he's built is not only is the food fantastic, what 60 beers on tap went to 84 beers on tap. And what I say is that's his millennium force. That gets people's attention. That's what people come to Small City Tap House to see, is the experience. But what he's doing now with the brewery is he has a unique beer product that he's offering one time only, starts at noon on Saturday, limited time, and there are 300 people showing up at 11 o'clock to get in line to get the beer. And it's that urgency, that marketing that is event-based, that gets people in, and it's not just during the summer, it's year-round. And so that's what he's building upon. That's why he built the brewery, and that's why he's investing what he is. And by the way, he always says, it's my family that's doing this, but he is the leader. A couple key facts here. Clegg Brewery, #1 brewery in Ohio. He has got that moniker from several sites. The #1 craft beer restaurant in Ohio. Well, how many craft beer restaurants are in Ohio? A dozen? 100? No, 366. #1 in the state of Ohio. And then Cloud Brewery is always ranked in the top beers listed on Untapped. You can imagine in the social media sites, I relate craft beer enthusiasts to roller coaster enthusiasts. They really pattern their life around these type of events, and it gets contagious. With the Trap List, I had to get there. This place is truly amazing. I would take this over any craft beer bar in the state, and this one was compelling to me. I live an hour away, but I would go there over any restaurant or any bar in the Cleveland area. When I first moved here 20 years ago, we went to Cleveland for dinner. That was our night out. You sit down there and you talk to someone at Small City Tap House. They're from Indianapolis and Pittsburgh and Ann Arbor, Columbus, Cleveland. It really is a draw. So I just wanted to make that point. Sorry to belabor that one. But since opening in 2014, the reinvestment is key here. As soon as they opened the facility in 14, they had to improve the kitchen and add on to it in 15. It was so popular. And to keep up with that, they added a sushi bar. So they were trying to broaden their product. The renovation to the south building after the acquisition of 216 doubled the size nearly for the capacity. It has the longest bar in all of Sandusky in the region. The brewery addition, however, is a game changer. It's a $1 million addition, and it's just starting. All told, the investment to date, beyond what the real estate value was and when it was purchased, was $2.1 million. But the projects that are proposed, we easily get to $2.7 million invested, already in the money, already spent, already in the building. And I'll talk a little bit about what the future holds for Small City Tap House and their intent. So that's the present. But let's go back 150 years. This corner of Columbus and Market really was the center of commerce for the city of Sandusky. There's the interurban, the Sandusky Electric Railway. That had an office within this building, but there were multiple tenants. It was like the mall of downtown. You could go there and buy about anything. SS Kresge took over, eventually became Kmart, which came to the suburbs. Jupiter Store took it over. And the reason why I really wanted to get into the history, not just about the fascination of how the building came there, but what happened to it over the years, and why is it still standing? And what do we need to do to keep it standing? So Jupiter painted the building about 75, 80 years into its life. That's when lime mortar fails. That's when water penetration gets in. That's when we start to see problems. Jupiter Store left in '87 and left it empty. Then it became Bourbon Street, then Cabana Jack's, and everyone was struggling to keep it going. Those years of vacancy have done a lot of damage to the building. So that's our commitment. We're going to bring it back. We're going to make it shine. And the proposal of this is, when you see it today, there are no windows upstairs. There are pieces missing of cornice. Everything else is secured with chicken wire and whatever it takes to get it done, but we're going to bring the building back. These are the detailed drawings that were presented to Landmark Commission. New windows, resurfacing and reconditioning, tuck pointing of the masonry, new awnings down below to bring in pedestrian scale, to bring in some cover because they get blasted with the sun. More windows all the way through the side, but we're going to bring it back and make it a star. This is the image shared with the city and part of, I think, studied by the city as well during the Columbus Avenue Corridor project, and dovetails, and we hope fits greatly within your plans. So in conclusion, I would like to say thank you, first of all, for hearing us, for your partnership. Mr. Webster, we've been in discussion for 18 months, encouraging us to move this project forward. Something happened on the way to the arena, which, we won't talk about COVID, but we are really trying to get to this project, get to it quick, about a 9-month project, restore the brick, put the windows in, get the final finish on the building, and really make it shine. So thank you. We just hope to do our part in partnership with the city and be a great member and standing in the community.
Thank you, Mr. Decker. Questions and comments, Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner.
First and foremost, I appreciate the presentation. I would also just like to add a couple comments, just in terms, I guess, just in regards to, maybe the question as to whether or not the investment or how he's given back, or how this family is given back to the community. I think that's made clear through their investment over the years. I know this family actually, took a chance on, Sandusky maybe 7 years ago when the downtown area was indeed struggling mightily. However, it was their vision. It was the vision of Ka that has really began to push things forward. And, and that being said, I mean, to make such an investment like that, that's not it wasn't $10,000 or $20,000. Here we are today. We're talking nearly $3 million. And so, although the $300,000 grant is what, maybe approximately 48% of the overall cost of this particular project, it's just what, maybe a little over 33% of the overall investment made. And I guess lastly, I would just have to say that I think this investment into this business, into this family, is a safe one, because I believe it's it's going to be around for decades to come, and not only that, but it's going to continue to spark individuals' interest, not only in in the craft brew business and small city tap house within itself, but it's also going to spark their interest in coming to Sandusky and seeing what we're all about. And at the end of the day, that that benefits all involved, all the businesses and everyone as a whole. So thank you.
Additional comments or questions, Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Poole.
Mr. Decker, would you expound a little bit on, I think, slide 8? If you bring those up, I want to look at the slides again. The one that talks about the point tucking and those things, if you would.
Sir, is it that slide or the other?
Yeah, I think that's the one. Essentially, the one that talks about what you're going to do to the building. And I'm really interested in what that means. I think you had the west facade up before, so maybe it's the one before it or after, I'm not sure.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there you go. Restore masonry wherever necessary. Tuck pointing may be required. What does that actually mean in terms of what you're going to do? What are you going to do to this building?
All right, Mr. Chairman and Commission, we can't sandblast it. We can't strip it. There's a coating on there now that we can, and according to the Department of the Interior of Historic Rehabilitation, the best thing to do is clean it up and tuck point where necessary, meaning it's a really tight joint as well. Tuck point where necessary and repaint it, recoat it. And we do that in 3 parts. We use an exceptional paint that goes along with masonry. It has to breathe at this point, basically. But in addition to that, what happens is it's a 3-weight brick building, the structure itself. So it's about that wide. But water has gone down through the wall over the years, and bricks are spalling. Bricks are deflecting.
So it
So
looks
we're going to
like.
stabilize the brick, draw those in. The structure's fine. We had an engineer look at that. In terms of reconditioning the outside, we need to be very gentle with it. Some of the pieces and parts that are missing, thankfully, have a twin that we can try to reconstruct off of that and put the cornice back. We have to clean, scrape, no chemicals, just to get it down to its surface, tuck point where we have to, and then reseal the facade with the breathable latex.
Okay, would you,
Mr. Poole, your original question is what's tuck pointing? I'm not sure Mr. Decker answered that, but
no, that was close enough.
Okay.
I get what tuck point, that's about
Get the
replacing
mortar back in the joint.
replacing the mortar. I understood that. I'm trying to figure out about that, the painting, and you covered what I needed. Would you go back to slide 6?
Okay.
There
This
you go.
one.
And you actually, another presentation was even better. Please look at the detail and contrast on that and how that look, and then go to slide 10. What's at issue here for most of us, for me anyway, is $300,000 is about what we get for it. It's as simple as that. And in terms of the change in this building, it appears to be the same building with glass instead of fiberboard. And I'm just, as has been expressed, $300,000, 48% of the cost is difficult in cash for me to deal with. And so just saying, yeah, that's where I'm at with that. And that's the only question I had for you. This is a wonderful project. The money that's been put in the building built the business into what it is, which is fine. The question is whether or not, for what's being done, is it going forward is $300,000 or 48% that is it justified when we have so many things on the agenda to deal with. But thank you. I don't have any more questions for you. The rest deals with the commission. I'll stand down in case let somebody else speak.
additional comments or questions, Commissioner?
Before I finish.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Twine?
First, thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate that. Thank you to Cott and his family for the investment in the community. I do have a great appreciation for the investment in the building. I appreciate the historical aspect of the building and the desire to bring it back. There were some comments about, putting that large amount of money into what seems to be one project. I think it's important for us to keep this in perspective, is that if we are not investing in the buildings and the architecture that makes Sandusky unique, it could be part of the further deterioration of what makes Sandusky unique. So I do appreciate that, and I think that's important. We don't want to lose these types of facilities, these types of buildings, because they are an important part of Sandusky. I remember I was born and raised here in Sandusky. I am in my late 50s, and I remember coming downtown. I remember going to Jupiter in that building. So there is an affinity to what was here before, and a great appreciation for the building up and the desire to continue to maintain or upbuild what is here so it doesn't further deteriorate. So I definitely support this project. And again, I appreciate the family investing in this area. There were some comments about investing money in minorities and things like that. Again, I think we need to leave things in perspective. We have planning and things like that to reinvest in other areas and other smaller businesses, minorities. So I don't want us to think that we have to do one at the expense of the other, because that is not the case. We are trying to do as much as we can to save the community, save the buildings that make Sandusky unique, while we're also trying to address other areas of the community. So again, thank you, and thank you.
Mr. Meinzer?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, thank you. I thought maybe I would just address Mr. Poole's question about the tuck pointing, because I have a little knowledge in building construction, but lime mortar was used back in the centuries ago with soft rock and limestone, and it's not like today's cement mortar where they lay up block and brick where they use Portland cement. So this lime mortar is very impervious to water, and by this time, I guarantee you're going to find pockets of sand in there. It's not mortar any longer. It's not holding the bricks together, because I've redone some buildings where these blocks just fall out. So if you don't address it, that facade and all that brick's going to separate from the interior of the building and just fall in the street, just like every one of these other buildings have been neglected downtown. So, the Landmark Commission, this was presented to, which I'm a member of, and they embraced this project. It's saving the historic preservation, and it's not just for this business owner. This building we're attempting to save for another 100 years, hopefully, with this project, hopefully. And I know the Economic Development Incentive Committee, which Ms. Twine's on, has embraced this project. So I'm just going to use, Mr. Poole gave me the thought in my head on the last agenda item. He said it's pretty tough to say no when you think it has a good chance to succeed. So when he said that, I thought seems like we have a proven winner here in Small City Tap House, and we've got a beautiful building. It just seems like it's going to be pretty hard to say no.
Additional comments, Commissioners?
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Poole.
Just in finally, I'll point out that any building we spend $300,000 in will be successful. It will be fine. The only thing I question here is whether $300,000 in cash is what we should be spending our money on. I would suggest that it sounds like this project, it really takes 3 years to point, tuck, and clean that up.
No, sir. No, sir. We intend to stabilize the building, the structure, the masonry right away. We believe that delivery times on everything are impossible, but to get the windows in. And so we're looking at, I'm hoping, at best case, 9 months. So this next spring, we would be in good shape to do that. Now, I think where you're headed, though, is what happens in the interim. The owner is willing to do what he can with a loan to bridge and work with the city on this. And as our understanding is that it is a draw after we have spent the money and submit. It's not a bag of money up front as a gift. It is what you earn as you complete the project to the satisfaction of design guidelines and to everything we're trying to accomplish. So I'm not clear on when all of those deliverables could be from the city, but we've been comfortable with the discussions to date.
That's fine.
Okay.
This is a 9-month project. I'm trying to understand why you're doing what's with 3 years of payments. Mr. Holliday, that's for you. What are we dealing with?
Yeah, and that really, Commissioner Poole, Commissioner Brady to Mr. Commissioner Poole, that really gets at some of the questions that were raised earlier. What the 3-year period does is it allows the city to disperse our funds over 3 years, which really allows us in the interim to work with more businesses and not use up the entire annual allocation of the Economic Development Fund on this one project. Essentially, it spreads our commitment to this project out over a number of years.
Okay, I'll come back to that in a moment. And here's my thoughts. This tuck pointing, what you're doing to this building is a building that belongs to the owner, and maintenance of their building is their responsibility, no matter what, and they will own the building when it's done. So I'm having trouble coming up with 48% of the cost of maintaining somebody else, for the taxpayers to do that. This is not designed to grow the business or do anything particular other than increase the value of the individual's property, that this Clegg Brewery will be successful anywhere that it goes. Likewise with this. So I would be a lot more comfortable, and I offer this to the commissioners, there should be a different way that we can come up with the money, whether it's, we talk about TIFs, you talk about tax abatement, you talk about a low-interest loan over 10 years. I don't have a problem with that, with a smaller grant, but there are too many businesses in the community that need money, and Mr. Garrett's point, although it's anecdotal information, and I've decided for the sake of the body to not go into looking into exactly how we've loaned out money. His point is worth paying attention to in terms of how we distribute and who you prioritize to get the bulk of the money that we're giving out. So I'm not abandoning that. So I would ask that someone comment on the possibility that we might come up with a different way to finance this rather than a flat $300,000. Additionally, I think we as a commission, with regard to the issue of funding 2 years from now, it's inappropriate for us to spend money that the next commission's going to have to try and budget around. I think it's technical, but the charter, you can technically get around it, but the charter does say specifically that we're not supposed to make contracts that are not going to be in full formulation, and that gets into legal stuff. So you get workarounds before if all of the commissioners are not going to still be here. So taking that, and it's not legal, I think the intent of that is to say, hey, guys, don't spend money that the next folks are supposed to spend. And based on that, the stands, I'm going to say no. I'd like to come up with a different way to finance it.
Mr. Webster, I believe you have a comment regarding the efficiency of that. And
Sure.
When you're finished, I would perhaps turn to our law director to speak to the legalities of what we're doing here tonight.
Absolutely. And through the commission president to Commissioner Poole and just generally, really briefly, and Brendan can certainly add more, but multi-year contracts are often executed by the city. It's not unprecedented. I know that we had, I believe, a 4-year grant agreement for the Bowling Green State University project downtown, which we just made our last payment on this past year. And certainly we're in a 7-year lease in this building that we sit in for the city commission chamber, so commissions can enter into contracts. It is a way for us to defer that cost, and to Mr. or Director Holliday's point, to allow us to continue to make more grants to small businesses. And to Mr. Garrett's earlier point, we have made numerous grants to minority-owned businesses and other businesses, small business throughout the city, but they're all actually usually at a higher percentage than where we end up in a project like this, but they're much smaller transactions. The scale of the transaction ultimately dictates the scale of the grant that we would make. And Mr. Decker said earlier, this is part of an 18-month conversation, and our conversations with Small City have gone back even further than Mr. Decker's involvement. When he came in, he helped to get this over the finish line, but we've talked to COP for years about the potential of this project, and over this time, that investment of $2.7 million, which we count acquisition as well over $3 million, we're within that 10% range. And I just want to make it really clear that this is a grant not to Small City, the business, but to the Stones Block building, which will stand for another century in Sandusky because of the very investments that are being made here. When the commission has chosen to not make those investments into buildings, the Keller building, for example, ended up costing the city, I think, around $600,000. We recouped that with about $120,000 sale of that property. We think this is a much better investment. The Cook Building's another good example, a building that was lost rather than saved, and the commission recently had to vote to put in about $2.3 million of net present value back into the Cook Building. The buildings that were damaged by the windstorm between Water Street and Shoreline that are now the homes of the Pedigo e-bike store that just opened in Shores and Islands, we have about $230,000 in that. That's about a $2.1 million transaction. So the costs of not saving these buildings and of creating holes in the downtown fabric end up over time being significantly more expensive than investing to preserve the building, to accelerate what is already a strong investment climate by folks like Small City, and to not end up with an inferior product necessarily because it's not authentic or historic. And that's not a knock on the buildings that have been rebuilt new. I can't wait for the new Cook Building. I really like what Mr. DeCesar has done with those townhouses, but it is much more affordable for us and in the community's benefit in the long term to make this upfront investment and partnership, which does fit within that 10% threshold when looked at in totality. And I think the multi-year presence helps us with that because it does allow us to continue to make those smaller business grants. And the last thing I'll say is with the urging of commissioners, we're actually looking at accelerating the amount of business resources that we can put for economic development into historically disadvantaged businesses. So the grant amounts that they would be eligible for would actually be greater percentage-wise than those of those who don't come from a disadvantaged category. So we are very committed to that goal, and hopefully you'll be hearing about that more, very soon and before the end of the year. So I'm happy to take any other questions, but because of the totality of those circumstances, it's why we brought the grant in this form. We think in the long run it's actually more affordable. And as to a TIF for this is actually a pretty small scale project for a TIF. Transaction costs on TIFs are very high and take years. This is compared to something the scale of the Cook of the BGSU, which are TIF'd or City Hall. This is a more modest project where to yield that $300,000, you'd probably have a few $100,000 transaction costs that just wouldn't make as much sense. So again, but I'm happy to answer more questions.
Mr. Hall, I wonder if you could speak to the legalities of this legislation, which entertains a multi-year financial commitment.
Sure. And as Mr. Wobser said, the city can enter into multi-year contracts. In fact, we have done so. And actually, the last large grant agreement that we all considered for the good time was a 5-year contract, although the financial structure of that was different. And then as to the charter question I think that we got earlier, would you like me to address that as well?
Yes, correct.
So the charter and the Ohio Revised Code require that our finance director certify that the funds are available. And what that means is that those funds are either currently not appropriated and available, or for future years are to be collected from tax revenue, from estimated tax revenues, and are not yet appropriated. And I believe we have the financial certification for this, so our finance director has made that determination that these funds are available, and that satisfies our charter requirements and our requirements under law.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Additional comments, Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman, just one last one. Although, some might argue that, this investment doesn't necessarily, grow the business per se, but, I think it does indeed, protect this business, by building up the exterior, thus giving this business an opportunity, a greater opportunity to grow over the years as it already is shown in the first 7. So, thank you.
Additional comments, Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Poole.
Okay. In response to the city manager, the initial conversation was the misrepresentation. This is not a multi-year contract. This contract will be done in 9 months. It's not multi-year. So, and I said at the outset that I recognize there's a workaround to make this work, that yes, we can technically do that, but the concept is the principle of us spending money that the next, and again, I said spending money, that the next commission actually should have control over. That we can get away with it, yes, I understand that. So you appreciate the explanation, but I did know that. But this is not a multi-year contract by any stretch of imagination. Contract will be completed and you'll just fill it out. I'd like to point out also too, there's nothing about tuck pointing this that suggests that this greatly successful business is going to be significantly more successful as a result of this. They're successful in the building with plywood on the wall, just as it sits. So that's not true. The only thing at issue here is, are the taxpayers, should they be spending 48% of the upgrades to the personal property of someone else? We talked about the concept, the manager did, about location. Let's just put it this way. We will be spending the money, the taxpayers, all 23,000 of us, no matter whether he stays, goes, or does not. The owner of the building gets to sell the building and keep our $300,000. And all I ask is that we finance this a little bit differently, so to provide differently than this cash funding right now. So I just want to be real clear about what I asked for. I think, yes, we should try and do something for this, and all this about it'll cost $100,000 to put together a TIF. Maybe it does, I'm not sure what it costs to do that. Tax abatement. A 1% loan, something so that there's a little more stuff in the game from the owner who will leave with everything, all of it. Now, we have invested money in all kinds of businesses downtown to attract people downtown, from which all businesses, including this one, will benefit. We've given up space. We've got a school that we just put in that hopefully will bring 200 people down here to spend money at Clegg Brewery. So we've done our part here to make these businesses successful. And the suggestion that somehow or another that we're obligated another $300,000 for windows, that unless I happen to think, and I haven't looked up at windows in so long, I haven't got a clue. I doubt anybody's coming downtown buying beer at these places, paying any attention to the upstairs windows. Additionally, if we are interested, and I'll digress and quit. If we were so interested in how impressive downtown Sandusky would be, I would suggest with the last TIF that we just did, that's going to put apartments upstairs, and we talk continuously about the beautiful bay and the beautiful view we have of Sandusky, we're putting up apartments on Columbus Avenue that don't have a balcony. You can't even sit out on your balcony and have a cup of coffee and look down the street, and we're building a brand new building. with no view of the water. So I would suggest you folks are just picky, tend to just pick and choose when we throw out all these wonderful words about how great this is supposed to be. And so, as I said, as it stands, I'll vote no. If you come up with a different financing project, way to finance it, I'll be happy to participate.
Mr. Presser, will you poll the commission on the motion, please?
Mr. Poole?
No.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Poole?
No.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Thank you, Mr. Decker.
Thank you.
Mr. Presser, will you present item number 4?
Yes, item number 4 is an ordinance declaring a 1992 Ford F-800 with Versalift aerial truck as unnecessary and unfit for city use pursuant to Section 25 of the city charter, authorizing and directing the city manager to purchase a 2023 Alltech LR 860 bucket truck from Alltech Industries Incorporated of Birmingham, Alabama, through the Sourcewell Cooperative Purchasing Program for the Forestry Division, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner
I
Flynn.
move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Mr. Klein, it sounds like we're getting rid of a truck and getting a new truck with a crane on it.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. This is actually a two-part piece of legislation. The first one is to purchase a new vehicle, and the second one is to put the old vehicle up for sale on the internet. So the truck that we currently have, the bucket truck that is currently, actually it's not in use, but it's sitting in the lot, is a 1992, so it's 30 years old almost, and it's no longer in use. The frame is damaged, and we just need to replace it so our crews can get back out there. We have another bucket truck that's 1999 that we haven't had too many issues with, but that one's 22 years old. So we need something that's reliable to make sure that field crews can get out and do the work for the forestry division that's needed throughout the city.
Comments or questions, Commissioners? Ms. Cressy, will you call the roll on the motion, please?
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Cressy, present item number 5, please.
Yes, item number 5 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a first amendment to the agreement for professional design services with Richard L. Bowen and Associates Incorporated of Cleveland, Ohio, for the Justice Center Design Project Phase 1 and 2, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Harris.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Meinzer.
I know we talked about this last meeting, location and price were a couple of things that we were concerned with, and I'm assuming this is probably 10% of the initial price that the architect is requiring to design the property. I just had a question about, did we do RFQs or RFPs, and how do we choose this architect?
Through the president to the commission and the public, the RFQ was actually done back in 2019, and that's when the city selected R.L. Bowen to do the architectural design and the inspection services. The original contract that we did was for about $90,000 for preliminary design. That was to go through the needs analysis and a couple other items so they knew exactly what was going to need to be in the final design with equipment, with flooring, roofing, all those types of things. The cost that they had in that preliminary design in that original agreement that we had was 8.5%. The final design would be 8.5% of the estimate, the construction estimate, and the inspection was 4% of the construction estimate. Usually those numbers are in the 9, 10, 11% range each. So the fact that both of them are under that is really nice. Now, one thing that I got them to agree to over the past couple of weeks was to fix their design numbers based on the previous construction estimate, not based on a new construction estimate, with the understanding that the cost of materials are going to skyrocket or have skyrocketed over the last year or two. So knowing that the design isn't going to be affected necessarily by those increased product number or costs and labor and shipping and those types of things, they agreed to hold the design at that 8.5% and 4% based on the previous construction numbers, so construction estimates. So one thing that I did want to point out, the fact that we are calling this an amendment, I think it's more for the just keeping track of things internally here. We could have done a new contract, but the fact that it is an amendment, because we already did the RFQ previously, it's really an amendment to that preliminary engineering, and we're adding the final engineering and the inspection to it. And one final thing I wanted to bring up related to this is that I don't know if you guys looked at the actual scope of services that was in there, but in probably around the January timeframe is when they estimated when they would be able to come back to commission for a presentation with renderings and that type of stuff, so you can see the layout and see what's going on at that location.
Additional questions, Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Poole?
the building exists, and I just have trouble spending $1 million on drawings for a building that's already there. I was under the impression before we moved out that the courts needed additional space, and the police department needed additional space also. We did vote at the last meeting with what you presented, and I voted for it, and I did it reluctantly, and I wish at this point, I apologize, I should not have. I have no idea what you're doing or what you're trying to do to improve these services whatsoever. It was never presented. You just said we need this, and apparently made meetings with the department heads and whoever and said this is our wish list of what we'd like to see. As a commissioner, I have no clue what the improvements are in terms of the services, what exactly the police department wanted differently. I've obviously heard about a Sally Port kind of concept, and I don't know for sure if that's part of this. But $1.4 million to do a drawing of a building that's already there, when we expected was there's empty space in the building. If the court needs more offices for doing what they do, they move into the empty offices we left out of, and perhaps some additions for the police department, because I understand they need space for fix up the detective bureau. I can understand it in my mind what's likely to be there, but absence any explanation from you folks, and I kind of voted last week, okay, thinking that was coming, but I can see where this is going. We're just going to continue to go down the path of approving money for something we haven't a clue what we're going to get at the end, other than it'll be new and everybody will like it because we've got it. And so if you've got something to tell me that said this is what the police department needs and what we're going to improve, and likewise with the courts at this point, I can't support another $1 million and keep one stepping down this road. It just doesn't make any sense. It's too much money for what's done, it appears to me. Thank you.
Additional comments, question? Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner
I'll
Meyer?
go back to that. That's what Ms. Poole was basically talking about. I asked about the qualifications. So back during the qualification process, which was a couple of us commissioners, it was vetted out, and is this firm specialize in police departments and courts, and have you visited some sites, and this is pretty reasonable? Is this high end? Is this middle of the road? Those are the kind of things that, I didn't have the opportunity to sit through in the qualification process or the RFQ process. I'm assuming Mr. Poole was involved, right? Or no? I don't know. That's why I'm asking about the RFQs.
It's run just like this has been.
Additional comments, Commissioners?
That was a question, sir.
You had a question?
I just wondered if he was qualified and he was actually, the firm was specialized in the police departments.
Yeah, through the commission president, this firm is definitely qualified to do this work. I think if I recall, we had 5 or 6 firms submit. We narrowed it down to 4, and there was a selection committee that was established prior to this that included one commissioner, the police chief, and the court, the judge. But in addition to that, we also included some engineers and some other people internally, planning department, included in that selection committee. They went through the whole process, read through the 5 or 6 qualifications that were received, prioritized this exact municipal type of structure with police, with court, whether they were the same building, whether they were different buildings. There's a very detailed process that went through for this. It went through the interview process, ranked all of them independently, and this was the firm that was selected and we began negotiations with back in 2019. So it was a very detailed process, right in line with what we do on all other projects. It's very independent, very much in line with what the state does and what we've always done, and getting opinions not only from the engineering division, but from anybody that would be a user of it and involved with it as well. So it was a good process, and I'm very comfortable with R.L. Bowen and being able to move forward with this.
Additional questions, Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman, I did have one other one that was in there. It was, I don't know how the figure of 12 million came up. So was this something that is high end, middle of the road, on the lower end, or how do we justify the 12 million? Or where did it even come from? Because it seems like the architect's, RFP is based on the 12 million.
Yeah, through the commission president, the 12 million was established during that first phase when they did the needs analysis, they did the program analysis and talked to everybody and figured out exactly what was needed, figured out the space, figured out all those things. What I can say is that that was done for the American Crant site. So the fact that we're moving over here, are those apples to apples? And they went through that process again very briefly at this location and found that the numbers were comparable. I went back to the study that was done by DS Architecture back in 2017, 2018 timeframe, and the numbers that came in at 12 million were actually less than what DS Architecture had included for theirs. They only included hard costs. They didn't include any of the engineering, any of the design, any of the inspection, any of the finished equipment as far as blinds and curtains, desks, those types of things that come in after the fact. But the 12 million that was estimated from Bowen last year, or in 2019, early 2020, was actually right in line with what DS Architecture had done in 2017, 2018, and that did not include escalation factors. So Bowen was actually very conservative and actually probably lower than what other firms probably would have been. So this contract also includes those, their thought process into it as well.
Additional questions, Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Wadding?
I would like to, after last meeting, I agree with Mr. Meisner. We've had a couple conversations about it. Had we got in it maybe like a month or 6 weeks ago, just little tidbits, maybe the alphabet A through Z, what's coming down the road. Okay. The 12 million kind of alarmed me too on the 222 Meg Street site. I don't know. I asked today for copies of that. I think they up in your office, or maybe Mr. Holliday knows. I talked to Arian today about if I could get a cut, just to look what it's going to look like in details for the cost. And are we asking for something beyond what we really need? I have no idea. If someone come up to me and said, Dave, I want a commission, I'd eliminate 4 of these chairs up here right now, I can tell you that, okay, and spread us out. This is crowded up here. So do I need a 40 by 40 room? I have no clue. It'd be nice just to, if some of us had questions, other than the key commissioners, if we could maybe let us know like a month out, hey, this is coming down the road. It would certainly, don't you think so, Mr. Meisner? We've talked, it'd be nice to know, wouldn't it? Instead of reading, it's like, wow. I'm done, okay.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make a comment that I too had some concerns, and I did get an opportunity to talk to some representatives of Bowen in reference to the 222 site, Meg Street site. I'm very comfortable with how they responded, the information that they provided. They have experience in these types of structures, so this is not their first rodeo. So I think they took into consideration some of the concerns that I had about whether it would be appropriate or it would meet the needs of the court system as well as our police department, because those were some concerns that came in the beginning of this whole process. So I feel very comfortable with the fact that they responded to my inquiries and questions, and I do support this legislation.
Additional comments, Commissioner?
And Mr. Chairman, just one last point. No needs have been identified to this commission at all. And that's why I can't vote for this. I have no idea what you're going to do, and you haven't told us what needs to be done, other than you're going to buy $12 million worth of new furniture and using numbers that are comparable to what it was when they were building a brand-new building. And I understand that the original, I'm not certain anymore, it's been so long, but it seems to me that the original estimate that we had included upgrading the building for all of us to be there. Is that correct or not? It's not correct. That was just police and fire in the city building. It's been so long since we talked about it. But the concept of, we never discussed that we needed to buy new curtains and $4 million or whatever it is worth of new furniture, and none of that's been identified to us. I don't know how much is going to be furniture, how much it's going to be, what are you going to do? And so I suggest that we are making a mistake voting yes, not without more information about what we're getting. And that's my only point. You just never told us what you're doing, other than we're building something new that we'd like. So that's all. I have no more to say except.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Meiser?
can I have one more bite of the apple?
Sure.
I think the RFP will come back, the proposal will come back, will clarify all the answers that you should answer our questions about what and size.
We're approving $1 million to get these answers.
I know
So all
that's,
they had to do is-
I'm not
all
saying,
they
I
got to do
get
is
it.
tell us.
So-
What is it I need on my,
Mr.
what do I
Poole,
need?
Mr. Meiser has
You're
the floor.
correct.
It's not supposed to be a debate.
My bad.
I understand it. $1.2 million is a big number to get to answer the questions that we have. So that's that part. So the other part of the concern I had was like Naomi's, was the battery park thing, and Mr. Wipser answered that last month. I was concerned because I thought, I was under the impression that Battery Park was part of the first master plan and was going to be developed, or was imminently going to be developed into something, and I was concerned about leaving the police station and courts there, because I thought it would be more valuable property and we should look at moving it. But we learned last month that Battery Park project could be 10 years down the road. It's not something that's just right here, right now. So I'm a little more inclined to let it sit where it is, let it be where it is. I don't have any qualms about that with that answer, but.
Ms. Cresser, you poll the commission on the motion, please.
Mr. Poole?
No.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Poole?
No.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Concludes our regular agenda. We'll turn to our city manager for his report.
Thank you, Commission President Brady, commissioners, staff, and audience. First, donations. Sandusky Rec would like to thank Ed Taylor for his $150 donation for the Youth Scholarship Fund. I'd ask for a motion.
So moved.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, the motion will be approved. Hearing no objection, that motion is approved with our thanks.
Thank you. Second, Sandusky Rec would also like to thank Erie Materials for their $3,975.44 donation of asphalt for the resurfacing of the Scott May basketball courts in J.C. Park. The donation was made in memory of city employee Talon Floor for his work in the park and throughout the city. I'd ask for a motion.
So moved.
Waiting for a second.
Second.
Got a motion and a second discussion. A delayed second. Without objection, that motion is approved. Without objection, the motion will be approved, and hearing no objection, that is approved with our thanks.
Great. Moving on to new and old business with Public Works, we're pleased to report that the Boy with the Boot fountain is operational for the time being. We're currently working with the pump vendor for a long-term solution, so it may run intermittently while we troubleshoot, but a special thanks to city electricians, sewer, and horticulture staff who have worked tirelessly to return the boot to its glory. Also, staff has been made aware of many recent posts on various social media forums regarding basement flooding resulting from the recent high-intensity, short-duration storm events experienced on 2 occasions over the past few weeks. A week ago Saturday, their city received 3.06 inches of rain in 15 hours, but the intense portion of the storm was over 1 inch in an hour. This past Sunday morning received over 1 inch in a 45-minute period. Combining these events with continuously high bay levels and saturated ground conditions, and the sewer system was surcharging at certain locations. Staff worked very hard investigating each and every phone call received to determine if there's an issue within the public sewer system itself or as a result of an ongoing capital project. If you have experienced a backup or flooding problem, please utilize the following phone numbers during normal business hours, Monday through Friday, which is between 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. Call 419-627-5829 or 419-627-5965. After hours, Monday through Friday, or on weekends and holidays, please call 419-627-5907 or 519-627-5900. I just want to make sure, is that 519 a typo? Is it 419? Okay, 419-627-5900. I apologize for that. This information is posted on the city's website at www.cityofsandusky.com/publicworks. And I too had some sewer backups in my own basement a few blocks from here. But they were on the exact dates in question that Mr. Klein mentioned, and it seems like that is pretty consistent that when those backups came, but we will continue to look at it. And I know this is also a global issue where I've seen reports of flooding throughout the country and really the world due to high rains this summer. So, but we know it's frustrating when that happens, and if there's a problem, as Director Klein mentioned in those statements, we will research each and every one. I know they were out researching individual calls today, and we'll continue to do so and try to get to the bottom of this. Moving on to economic development. With financial assistance from the city's Economic Development Fund, Honor Commercial has completed their initial renovations and begun to occupy the former YMCA building on Perkins Ave. The company plans to renovate additional parts of the building and to continue to grow in Sandusky. Also at its meeting on July 13th, the Economic Development Incentive Committee approved grants for Derek Steiner, Dot Investments, Doing Business as Kitty Corral, and FSB Properties at 135 to 145 Columbus Avenue. For Planning and Zoning, Landmarks Commission has 2 open seats. If any commissioners know volunteers from the community who would like to be involved, please refer them to the boards and commissioner volunteer application on the city's website. Also, the designated outdoor refreshment area, commonly known as DORA, has been up and running as of Friday, July 16th. Planning has been working closely with participating businesses to make sure they understand how to participate in DORA and to communicate with customers. If you're in attendance at the concert last Tuesday or within DORA over the weekend, you might have seen that businesses and the community are embracing it, and that DORA is playing its intended role in promoting a lively, pedestrian-friendly environment and creating a destination for dining and entertainment. Also, planning is working to organize a series of neighborhood meetings to highlight the new projects and improvements that have been accomplished in the city's neighborhoods. These include 892 new homeowners that received assistance for home beautification, improvements and updates at 10 city parks, 7 public art installations, and collaborations including tree planting, traffic calming, neighborhood signage, and street repaving. Once the meeting times are set, and we're working on that today, so hopefully we'll have some news on that in the next few days. They will be widely and publicly advertised. These events will be a great way to celebrate accomplishments in the past 5 years and to talk to the community about their vision for the needs of our neighborhoods over the next 5 years. Also, the next Arts and Culture Commission meeting will be Tuesday, August 17th at 5:15. Landmark Commission is scheduled for Wednesday, August 18th at 5 p.m., and the Board of Zoning Appeals is scheduled for Thursday, August 19th at 4:30 p.m., while the next Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, July 28th at 5 p.m. For Sandusky Transit, the new pay rate for drivers, which was made possible by the recently approved contract amendment, has greatly increased the number of applicants. Staff is currently exploring options to continue transit service past the expiration of the existing contract with First Transit in March of next year. And for recreation, Sandusky Rec would like to thank everyone who helped plan and also attended the most recent programming taking place on the Jackson Street Pier. The Tuesday night Hoobastank Living Color concert was an overwhelming success. Party at the Pier and Movies by the Bay series have overcome difficult weather to also have good attendance, and events by the Fire and Symphony Orchestra and others have continued to have strong attendance. Also, the 7th annual Touch a Truck National Night Out event is scheduled for Tuesday, August 3rd from 4 to 7th at the Sandusky Bay Pavilion, Battery Park. and 222 Megs North parking lot. The event will feature area law enforcement, fire departments, municipal vehicles, local organizations, and private companies for a family-friendly event. And then finally, this year's event will end with a showing of the movie Cars at 7 p.m. at the Sandusky Bay Pavilion, sponsored by the Whiteman Weber Celebration Safety Fair and Kids Fun Festival Committee. That concludes my remarks for this evening. I'm happy to answer any and all questions or take comments.
City Manager, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman,
Bishop Poole.
a couple. Regard to the Dora, the cups that they're using downtown, where do they come from? Who buys those and I know they're putting stickers on them or something. What's up? What's going on? How's it work?
Through the commission president, per the DORA, the city sets the standards of who purchases the cups. Right now, we have cups on back order. We did order a special biodegradable cup based on community concerns to make sure that we weren't causing damage or pollution to Sandusky Bay, which has taken a little while for those to order. In the interim period, so we could start the DORA while we waited for the cups, we worked with, I believe, Loris Printing to print a few thousand stickers, which were distributed to the bars and restaurants so they could place them on a transparent plastic cup. But we will replace those cups with the cups that once they come in later this summer.
Okay. The IT, could you fix his microphone? It was really garbled. Maybe you guys hear better than I do. I got most of it, but it may be just your gravelly voice.
I'll stand back, too.
It may be what it is. It's difficult. So I take it then the cups are, what you're saying is the special cups, the ones that have the stuff already on it or on order?
Yeah.
All right, what becomes the question is long-term, who's buying these? I'm not comfortable with the city buying cups for businesses downtown.
So through the commission president to Commissioner Poole, we're currently buying the cups. The way that it works in most communities, and Tom Horseman from the Community Development Department has researched this quite extensively, is the cities recoup their costs by selling the cups to the businesses. Oftentimes, and it will be up to the city later, we have not determined to do this year. This year we just wanted to get up and running, but as we go into next year, they actually provide a markup on the cup, sometimes by as much as $1 per cup, which then get passed on to the customer, and then put those funds towards some effort, whether that's marketing or something along those lines. We have not made any decisions on whether we're just going to pass on our costs to local businesses or whether it makes sense to add a surcharge, but it is the city who dictates that, and our goal is to recoup our expenses for the cups at the very least, if not to. And we've seen 50 cents. I don't think we've seen more than $1, but oftentimes there is a surcharge of at least 50 cents and $1 per cup. And if you look, actually, some of the downtown businesses are already charging an extra $1 for a Dora cup with the drink, which right now they're keeping, but in the future would go towards paying us for that surcharge, which would go into a designated pot, should we go in that order.
Okay, fine. Would you in your report, at least every it's every 2 weeks, how much money we have invested in cups? And the concept of taxpayers buying the cups and then buying the cups again when they buy the beer is not really such a great process. I mean, really and truly, long-term, Mr. Chairman, the bars need to buy their own cups. Taxpayers should not be paying for their cups.
May I interject?
Oh, go ahead.
Just to grow on that, actually, after the first round, the way it's set up is the bars will buy the cups directly from the vendor. But Mr. Webster is correct, for the first round of cups, just to get them ordered, since we were trying to do this quickly, the first round of cups, we worked out it with the vendor. We would purchase a bulk and recoup the costs. After that first round, bar owners can buy directly from the vendor at cost and get them so quickly. So we've worked out a system, and I think that's what, yeah.
Oh, that's fine. Lastly, changing gears, on landmark, there seems to be an issue about our landmark legislation.
There was.
I would like to ensure, let's put it this, I'll start the conversation. I believe that we have committees and commissions that need people with special expertise that you don't need to be a resident of the city to live there, here.
That would be a violation of our ordinance.
Yeah, and I'm saying it's our ordinance. I'm suggesting that for the good of the community, that should identify the committees that do or do not need residents and clarify in an ordinance how we can word that so that it's not unclear. Okay, we just need to separate resident from whatever it is that you want to use that we can freely, that we define, that we can appoint people to committees that don't live in the city. the concept of the interpretation under one law director changes when we get a different law director, requires us to provide some direction. It's not that it's wrong as it is now. We didn't provide direction. Some of us made assumptions about what it meant, and I'm just saying, going forward, let's clear it up. If you want to discuss it now, that's fine, but I'm putting it out there for everybody at the meeting.
I think it is appropriate that we discuss it now, and obviously each commissioner, I know each commissioner received the resignation letter from our chair and our vice chair of the Landmark Commission. Those resignations, I think, are the result of an opinion and advice from our law director that two members of that commission, other than the chairman and the vice chairman, were serving without being citizens of Sandusky, which is required by the legislation, not just in the Landmark Commission, but it's required in our Planning Commission, and it's also required in our Board of Zoning Appeals legislation. And the reasoning for that, or the reason for that, is those commissions vote on issues that have, help me with the word, Mr. Heil, they're voting on issues that can be litigated. They are not advisory boards. They are something other than advisory boards.
That's correct. I don't know if there's a specific term for it, but all of the boards you mentioned both have a residency requirement and generally make decisions that are potentially final. They can be appealed sometimes to the city commission, sometimes through litigation, but they actually make a determination, for instance, in landmarks, historical guidelines.
And to put this in context, that issue came to light in a very recent issue before the Landmark Commission by a person making a presentation who got an adverse ruling from the Landmark Commission. And the issue was raised by that applicant that he felt the vote was illegal. And because the vote was illegal because we had two members that did not live in this city, which was contrary to our legislation. Now, our law director was doing his job, advising us of that fact that we were in violation of our own legislation. And I don't want to put this at the doorstep of our law director. That's what we pay the law director to do, is to give us that advice. And if this commission wants to change legislation or amend legislation, I would suggest that you shouldn't pick and choose doing that. You should do that for all of these boards if that's what you're going to do. I, for one, am not comfortable with having people who do not live in this city have a vote on planning or have a vote on zoning board of appeals or have a vote on landmark. I think it's very appropriate, and I think the legislation is written very appropriately, that we should have citizens of Sandusky performing those functions.
And if I could really,
Mr. Webster.
through the commission president too, just to clarify something that Commissioner Poole stated, I don't believe it was a difference of opinion between law directors as to what did or didn't apply. It was that one of the Landmark Commission members was a resident of the city when he was placed on the board. We were unaware that he had moved from the city, and the other one had listed a Sandusky address, which was actually a boathouse, which was not their domicile or residency, and it was taken at face value and reviewed the application. So we had only become aware of it later, but no law director has ever stated that a member of planning, BZA, or landmarks should not be a resident of the city per the existing ordinance. So.
So I think it really is, we really do need to hear, the will of this commission as to how you would like to proceed with that. Mr. Wadding.
Sure. We're actually down 4 from that. We're talking 2, we're down 4. So that needs to be addressed at some time. And I think I talked to the city manager today. They're going to have a meeting this coming week and try to get that resolved.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice.
I think regardless, it needs to be very clear in the legislation and language. I mean, because Landmark Commission members did bring up a discrepancy between citizen and residents. So instead of having to really interpret it, we should make it defined. And the other thing is, I mean, to think about it, you're talking about not being comfortable. I'm not comfortable with police, fire, school teachers, department heads, administrators not living in town. I mean, I'm old school. I wish they all lived here. But we're going out and looking for expert and the best employees we can get. We got the best department head administrators that we can find to lure here. So I'm not against allowing outside people come in and serve on our boards if they're qualified and they have the paper to back it up. anybody wants to.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner,
Yeah, I don't really have a definite opinion one way or the other, but we need to be consistent because that does cause confusion if we allow for one board or commission and then not for another. I don't have a problem if we're lacking someone that has the expertise that lives within the city limits. And then, yes, we are extending our invitation for someone to volunteer for a committee. Again, I think there needs to be some parameters and it needs to be consistent across the board. And I can understand that, we're taking people at their face value when they fill out the application with an address. We are not, I don't believe that we should be thoroughly following people home to see if they live in the city and things like that. But again, I don't really have an opinion one way or the other, just needs to be consistent.
I agree. Mr. Heil, are we consistent from the standpoint of oftentimes on advisory boards, there is not a residency requirement or a citizen of Sandusky requirement, I might say, as opposed to the 3 boards that I mentioned having a citizen of Sandusky requirement?
I would have to double check to be absolutely certain, but another board that I believe requires citizens, it uses the word citizen as the EDIC, which again is a board that makes a determination on dispersing grants. So generally speaking, I think that's correct. I don't want to say that categorically that's correct without actually going back through.
Do you feel there's any ambiguity there in using the term citizen of Sandusky or resident of Sandusky?
I do not. I believe that they can be used interchangeably in this because you cannot be a citizen or a resident of 2 different places. So you're either a resident of Sandusky or you're not. You're either a citizen of Sandusky or you're not. But it is obviously something that if commission desires, we can explore legislation to clarify, use one or the other term. However, my department is directed, we would obviously look into that and make sure that that's done.
I personally do not have an issue with it. It was crystal clear to myself what that was, but if you think there is some ambiguity to that, which it doesn't sound like to me like you do, if this commission feels there's some ambiguity to that, I'm certainly not opposed to changing some wording on it.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest maybe we have the law department or whoever provide us with information on all the boards and commissions, the makeup, because we did go through an extensive review of all the boards and commissions a few years ago. But I think, it doesn't hurt to revisit that so we can have some information and come back with some opportunities to provide better discussion on what we think we want.
I'm going to put that in a form of motion.
May I ask a clarifying question? Just to make sure I understand, and however you make the motion is obviously up to you, but is it for information both on what boards have a residency requirement, or would you like also information on kind of what are the requirements for serving on that board generally for each board?
Both.
Both, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I can look on the website and see which committees require residency versus citizen or whatever it is you do. I'd like to try and accomplish something here, though, before we go, in terms of giving him something actually to move us forward. Is it the feeling of the board that we need, or that there are times that non-residents can serve on committees, that we need people with expertise that don't live here? Now, I realize everybody's got personal feelings, but that's a simple question, because if not, then we don't need to do anything at all. If you've decided that we're going to close off at the borders and no information from outside from other people is needed on any of our committees, I would say then we don't need to do anything. So can we start with that question? Because if we do, then we need more from the law director.
Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Maggi.
I've been on the landmark committee as a liaison for about 18 months, and I can assure you that I am not qualified to be the chairperson of that committee. There's a lot of detail that goes into not saying that I can't learn it. I'll start studying. If we lost 4 people pretty quick, I might have to cram course it. But there's a lot. I don't know how many qualified people there are in a city that are willing to do that. Chair it.
Additional discussion, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, for me, when I need to make a decision, information is valuable for me. I don't want to make decisions based upon limited information or what I think I know. So that's why I made the suggestion, and I can put that in the form of a motion that we allow the Law Department to provide this commission with information related to all the boards and commissions, the makeup, the definition of citizen and resident, so that we can have more information. Yes, we can pull up the legislation and things like that, but frankly, I have two jobs, and I prefer a little bit more directed information from the Law Department to provide a little bit of parameter as to what we can and can't do, and the information that we need to know in order to make a competent decision about what needs to be done.
We have a motion on the floor to ask the law director to provide this commission with the information regarding the makeup and the verbiage on our boards and commissions. Do I have a second? I will second that motion.
Time for discussion?
Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, just to the law director, you now have the clarification.
Yes.
She would like to know whether or not, I presume you were talking to addressing what I asked, which is it in the city's interest to have people from outside on our committees or commissions? That's part of what the conversation is about. And so if you have to research other cities or whatever it is, crystal ball that Ms. Twine thinks that you have to answer that question, because that's really what's needed here. Now,
So,
a list of how many committees we have and whether the people are residents or not is nice to know. It does not address whether or not we should allow people, the most qualified person on the landmark committee is a person from out of town, because there's nobody in town that has qualifications to talk intelligently or has experience to any degree dealing with the historical buildings. And see, that's what it's about. And the two people who resigned in protest because they recognize that in the charter, we say, as a qualification, you shall continue to be a resident of the city of Sandusky. And 3 years after we did the landmark commission, and we did that, and specifically said citizen of the city, and then appointed this person to it, we have a different interpretation. See, this committee appointed the gentleman that you told, and I didn't say you made a mistake. You didn't. You came in and read it, and you took it for what it was. I don't have a problem with it. That's what needs to be cleared up. And to do that, to start with, we have to decide whether or not we want anybody from out of town on any of our committees. And that's really what, she wants legal advice on that. To the degree you're able to finish that together, appreciate you do that, because if you don't, I'm going to ask, that's what I'll ask you when you come back. So I'll vote yes on her motion, but that's what I'm looking for.
so point of order to clarify, is the motion, as I understood it, was...
I'm sorry. The original question came about the makeup of the landmark committee. My response to that is that we need to be consistent across the board. And so when I mean consistency, that means also understanding all the boards and commissions, the makeup, the definition of citizen and resident. And so now if Commissioner Poole just wants to singly focus on the landmark commission, so thank you. So don't put.
It applies to all of them. It applies to all committees.
Yes.
That's not
So I'm not trying to put anything on you like you're trying to put on me. So I'm trying to clear that up. So again, my response is if we're going to make a decision, it needs to be consistent. And I'm asking for consistency. That's all.
We have a motion and we have a second, and we've had discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Meiser.
is it, this is probably for Mr. Heil, but is it possible just to put in a definition or an appendix, just say citizen and resident is interchangeable throughout this charter, and then if that's the consensus of what everybody wants to do is make it a resident, so.
That's what we're leading to.
I mean, instead of going through each ordinance and writing new ordinance, just in the preamble or the definitions, just put something, citizen and residents are interchangeable throughout these documents.
Mr. Chairman, that's what I'm leading to make that decision of how, do we separate those two definitions or not? You need to decide, do we want anybody from out of town? That's simple, we talked about this together, that's what it
We don't
comes
have to do
down
it right now, just after we get what Ms. Twine wants.
Exactly what we're talking about here.
Is it appropriate?
Yeah.
Is it appropriate, if this motion is to pass, I believe it is appropriate for Mr. Heil to come back with the information that the motion requires and give us some knowledge on this. That's where we are at.
That was my understanding. I just wanted to make sure that was the direction that the commission was seeking.
I think we're all
To give
looking
me.
for more information. I
Sure.
think that's what Commissioner Twine's motion, bottom line, really is, to provide us with information to make an intelligent decision.
Absolutely.
Mr. Trester, will you call a roll on that motion?
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
That motion is passed. Good luck, Mr. Heil.
Thank you.
I need to make a request for a motion to approve Ms. Kresser as our interim commission clerk and relieve Mr. Heil of that responsibility.
Second. Or motion, so moved. Sorry.
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, that motion will be approved, and hearing no objection, that motion is approved. Ms. Kresser, welcome back. I know you usually like to have roll calls, but you are a unanimous choice. You need no roll call. Thank you for returning.
Thank you.
Additional items of new business, Commissioners.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
my coffee with the commission is going to be this Saturday, July 31st, and we have Chief Oliver has agreed to attend. We're going to have it here in the commission chambers.
At what time?
9.
9 o'clock Saturday?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Poole.
we're doing new business still? Oh, okay, just a note for commissioners to be thinking about. I got a call from a citizen in Coal Creek about purchasing a lot next door to expand his property, to add a building or something like that. And it appears that to do that requires authorizations from us, not asking him to do anything today, but between now and next week, let's be thinking about, or gather, and staff can provide us information on whether it's a good idea or not.
That be direction to
Yeah.
Mr. Holliday?
Yeah,
Good.
Mr. Holly,
You give me that
you
contact?
send that out beforehand. And essentially, I'm thinking, how many lots have been sold since we started this process of selling it with the last contract we had? And I understand several people have asked the same question, where they're at and perhaps what our contractor thinks about overall doing that. I understand if it's simple enough that if people take over a lot that doesn't get a house on it, then theoretically we make less money, obviously, than if someone builds on it. But those lots out there are of different sizes. Some of them are more or less desirable than others, and we need to be being very specific about whether or not we want to be left with lots that we can't sell that could otherwise have been absorbed. That kind of concept, that'll tell us. I don't want to sit on empty lots for next 5, 6, 8 years, as long as this project's been going on, when somebody said that I would like to buy it to expand on it, and you can put whatever restrictions you want on building, because obviously we don't want to compete against ourselves by selling lots that other people are selling. You can put a time limit on it. There are lots of things to do with it, but that's the concept.
Great.
But we do need to give an answer.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Poole. I need a motion to set a public hearing for September 13th regarding an amendment to the zoning map for 431 Columbus Avenue. That means someone has to make that motion.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second, and it's been seconded. That motion will be approved, and hearing no objection, that motion is approved. Any other items of new business, Commissioners? Items of new business. Items of old business, Commissioners. Anything old that you have hanging out there? No items of old business. Ms. Kresser, do we have any written comments regarding any items regarding the city?
Yes, Mr. Brady had one comment that was emailed from Tim Schwanger, 362 Sheffield Way, asking what is the project loss in Economic Development Incentive Committee funds created by lower admissions tax receipts from Cedar Fair due to extended Gold Pass use in 2021 and the relocation of Cedar Point executives to Charlotte, North Carolina. At the July Economic Development Incentive Committee meeting, the chairman of the committee hinted that the city may have to allocate money from other city sources to fund the Economic Development Fund in the future.
That is all, Mr. President?
That is all.
Sounds like that is a question for our finance director. If you'll forward that to our finance director.
I believe he received it, or she received it, as well as Mr. Holiday, so.
Are there any residents that would like to provide a comment on any item affecting city business? We've worn them out. Yes, sir. Step to the podium if you would and tell us your name and address and we'll put it in the record. And we'd like to hear your comment.
Yeah, John Kempton, I own property at 117 East Osborne Street, and I would just amplify a little bit to what Mr. Wobser said about the flooding, because we had the same thing 2 weeks in a row, and prior to that, they did some work 2 years ago, and we had nothing, no flooding, no problems. It's a couple inches, it was clear, thank goodness,
Just rainwater.
but rainwater. But there's so many people in the social media, as you might have read, that had stuff far worse than furnaces out, all this sort of thing. And I wondered if there's anything in the offing, maybe bigger trunks, bigger laterals, like they used to have storage at the foot of McEwen Street. I don't know if they do that anymore. That was years ago, a rubber device that stored water and then leaked it back into the system again. Or if there's any, I know this is somewhat like, it's not a 100-year event, because 100-year events are happening all the time anymore. And I wondered if there was anything in the offing that engineering or whatever was planning. I talked to Mr. Cromer, Luke, on both instances, and he's been very cooperative. He's talking about backflow preventer and so forth, but it'll cost sufficient amount of money for us to do this, and we may end up having to do some of these things, which, that's the way it is when your properties are aging and so forth. But I just wondered if there was any large plan to address some of these things.
Mr. Klein, we'll be able to gather your name and number, and I'm sure you'll want to look at that area and your residents. I know as early as this afternoon, we had 3 people out taking manhole covers off, looking for what could be blockages or could be something that is, that's causing this. So we're certainly not ignoring this issue.
Right.
No intention of ignoring the issue. And I'm not going to tell you the water level's high or the act of God or 100-year rain, because we have 100-year rain about every 30 days.
Well, I worked for the water department 25 years ago, so I know what you're talking about.
I get it, but we are sensitive to that issue, and Mr. Klein will look specifically at your neighborhood and see if there's something unusual going on there.
Yeah, because they poured a new thing that was a manhole access and cleaned out some stuff a couple years ago, and we thought, wow, this is great. And then 2 weeks in a row, we thought, oh boy.
Yeah, not so great.
I appreciate, anything you can do in that regard.
Thanks for your comment.
Thank you.
Additional comments from residents? I don't see any additional residents. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.